The confirmation signal arrived at SO 317 station time, a single compressed burst from the relay buoy we had parked in the outer belt of the Reach system 18 years before. It carried 41 seconds of telemetry. That was all there was, because after 41 seconds there was nothing left to transmit. I ran the data twice. I sat with it, in the quiet of the coordination suite, while the rest of the station slept. And I made myself read every line. Sanctuary Reach had been a protected colony, classified under the Covenant of Withdrawn Peoples, sealed from general charts, inhabited by roughly 12,000 civilians, scholars, and the families of scholars. No garrison, no weapons platform. Treaty language was unambiguous. The Reach was to be left alone, untouched, inviolate by any signatory party, and by any party operating within signatory space. The Verath Dominion had been a signatory for 63 years. Their orbital bombardment lasted 41 seconds. I did not shout. I did not grieve. Not then. There was no time for it, and it would not have helped the 12,000. What I did was open the sequence lock on a channel I had maintained for 11 years without once activating it. I keyed the header, typed 4 words. I transmitted. The 4 words were, Ardent Tide, threshold met. 40 years earlier, before I was assigned to the coordination suite, before I had a clearance level high enough to know the program existed, a small number of people in a room that no official record acknowledged had looked at the pattern of Dominion expansion and asked a question that no one else in the diplomatic corps was willing to frame. They had asked, what is the correct answer if the Dominion ever crosses a protected site? The answer they came to was not a memorandum. It was not a protest resolution. It was a construction program. The Ardent Tide had been building in deep-covered dry docks for 40 years. A string of installations embedded in hollowed-out bodies at the far edge, surveyed space, powered by buried reactors, crewed by people who had accepted the assignment, knowing they might spend their entire careers in the dark and never be needed. 900 hulls. Not a fleet in the traditional sense. There were no carriers, no support vessels, no hospital ships. The Ardent Tide was nothing but warships. Heavy line units, each one overbuilt, overarmed, and carrying enough ordnance to reduce a populated orbital station to expanding debris in under 4 minutes. The people who designed it had done the arithmetic on Dominion response capability, on their shield net density, on their reserve fleet positions, and they had deliberately built something that exceeded every margin by a factor that was not a margin at all. It was a message, in hull plating and drive cores, that the program's architects had hoped would never need to be sent. My 4 words sent it. I spent the next 6 hours on the logistics channel, not because the Ardent Tide needed me. It did not. It had its own command structure and its own orders, which had been written before I was born. But because I was the coordination layer, the link between the dry dock network and the political tier that would need to account for what happened next, I flagged the Reach telemetry to the Deputy Secretary's office. I filed the incident report under the treaty breach protocols. I did both of those things carefully and correctly, and while I did them, the Ardent Tide was already moving. 900 ships do not leave a dry dock quietly. Even dispersed across 11 installations at the edge of surveyed space, the gravitational signature of that many drives, lighting together registers on long-range instruments. The Dominion's border monitoring net would have detected the readings within hours. I did not know whether they understood what they were looking at. I supposed it did not change anything if they did. By hour 9, I received the first political query from the Deputy Secretary's office. They asked whether the activation was confirmed and whether it was reversible. I confirmed it. I told them it was not reversible. Did not explain further because there was nothing to explain. The program had a threshold. The threshold had been met, and the threshold had been met in the clearest possible way. An undefended protected site, inhabited entirely by civilians, erased in 41 seconds by a signatory power that had known exactly what it was targeting. There was no ambiguity to resolve. There was no diplomatic channel to exhaust. The 12,000 people on Sanctuary Reach had not had 41 seconds to petition for a review. At hour 14, I received the Dominion's communication. It was not an apology. It was a statement of position. The Reach colony had been determined to be in violation of secondary navigational agreements that the Dominion's legal office had constructed in the 3 months prior to the bombardment, specifically for this purpose. They had, in other words, built the pretext before they built the act. They closed the transmission by requesting that any unusual fleet activity in the outer survey zones be explained, and stood down. I read the transmission. I drafted no reply. There was nothing in the program's architecture that called for a reply at this stage, and I found that I agreed with the architects. By hour 22, the first elements of the Ardent Tide entered the outer approaches of Dominion. Space, 900 hulls in a dispersed formation designed to saturate their detection grid at too many points to sequence a coherent response. Not because the program expected resistance that could matter, but because the architects had been thorough people who did not want the operation complicated by avoidable friction. The Dominion's border station at Verath Crossing transmitted a halt order on every standard frequency. The Ardent Tide did not halt. It had not been designed to halt. I stayed at my station through the transition period. There was not much for me to do. The Ardent Tide was a mechanism, not an improvisation, and mechanisms do not need coordinations once the sequence has begun. What I did do, at hour 26, was compose a single transmission addressed to the Dominion's high convocation, the 11 body that held executive authority over their treaty relationships. I wrote it carefully. It was short. It said, Sanctuary Reach held 12,000 people. Covenant of Withdrawn Peoples is not a secondary navigational agreement. What is moving toward you now is the correct answer to what you did. It will not stop, and there will be no further communication from this office. I sent it and closed the channel. The Ardent Tide reached primary Dominion space in hour 31. The engagement logs came back to me in compressed bursts over the following 9 hours, not in real time, because real time would have meant watching it, and my job was record-keeping, not witnessing. I read the logs in sequence, entry by entry. The Dominion's reserve fleet engaged at the threshold of their home system. They had, by standard military assessment, a capable force. The assessment had been made by people who had not known the Ardent Tide existed. 900 ships, overbuilt, each one carrying the answer the architects had promised, is not a capable forces problem. It is an arithmetic problem, and the arithmetic had been settled 40 years ago in a room no official record acknowledged. By hour 40, I filed the closing incident report. I listed the treaty breach, the threshold activation, the force composition, and the outcome. I attached the 41 seconds of reach telemetry to the front of the file, as the program's protocols specified, so that anyone who read the report would encounter the cause before they encountered the response. That had been the architect's instruction. Soon I thought it was correct. The response without the cause is only destruction. The cause before the response is a reckoning. I do not know who originally designed the threshold language, which specific acts would open the sequence lock and which would not. I do know they were precise people. They did not set the threshold where it was by accident. They set it there because they had looked at what the galaxy would do, given time, and they had wanted it understood that there was one category of act, specific, deliberate, targeting the undefended, hiding behind paper legality, that would not be answered with a committee. Sanctuary Reach was a quiet world. It had been quiet for 40 years, while the Ardent Tide waited in the dark. The Dominion chose it because it was quiet, because they believed that quiet meant safe. They had misread the silence entirely.